Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to day 7 of All About That Place, where today we are thinking about politics and rights. I'm joined here by Elsa, Jude, Liz, and Joe, just in the order they are on my screen, and we'll go around and introduce ourselves. So, Elsa.
Hi there, I'm the genealogist at the Society of Genealogists, and as part of my series of talks for All About That Place, I'll be looking at early tax records and the responsibilities and rights that they gave you, including in some issues to vote.
Jude.
Hi, I'm Jude. I'm a family and local historian, thanks to Joe's teaching. And I'm interested in the rights of people with regard their employment and education and health.
Thank you. Joe?
Thank you. I think you're a family local historian in your own right, Jude, but that's very kind. I'm Joe. I'm a family local historian, part-time PhD student at York, and I'm currently vice chair of the British Association for Local History.
Thank you. And Liz?
Hi, I'm Liz Craig. I'm from the Society for One Place Studies. I've got a variety of one place studies of my own, and also an advocate for Joe's courses.
Thank you. And I'm Ruth. As you probably know by now, I'm the Events and Education Manager at the Society of Genealogists. So let's launch straight in and have a look at our tasks in the workbook for today. So, as we said, it's all about politics and rights. So we're asking you to think about what changed, when, why, and how, either in your place or for your ancestors. And there's some ideas to consider, whether that's the democratic rights, the ownership rights, human rights, workers' rights, and the protections and freedoms, education rights, legal rights, and other rights. And then we also ask you to have a think about the political landscape. So if you're thinking about your ancestors in a particular time and place, who were the monarchy, the presidents, the prime ministers, what impact might the local government have had, the competitors, whether that's other big companies, political parties, and what about the dissenters and radicals? How would those have affected your place and your ancestors? So I'll stop sharing that. And over to you guys. Has anybody got any thoughts about which things they're most interested in looking into?
I think I'd quite like to look at the sort of parish councils in my places. I know one of my ancestors was elected to serve on the parish council, and I came across a very interesting news article where all those who had been elected refused to serve, which I thought was quite bizarre. So that's something I'd like to get to the bottom of. And also, I think I've become increasingly aware since doing one place studies of the local landowner. If people were sort of tenanted farmers, quite often, their lives would have been very much affected by that. And certainly, but perhaps even to a legal extent in the earlier days.
And what sort of records do you think you might be going to look for, Liz, to dig into that?
That's a very good question. I think probably I'm going to continue searching newspaper reports just because I'm a long way away from the archives. And in fact, the main archive I would need to visit is now closed for 3 months. So I think I'm going to stick with newspaper reports for now, possibly contact the local family history society. But I'll be going to the archives at some point, hopefully in the new year, and seeing what they might hold for records of parish councils. So that would be my first instance. Although if there was an element of controversy, I don't know how much of that would have been recorded. So it'll be interesting to see if I get to the bottom of it.
Interestingly, on that, I recently was looking at some parish meeting minutes, which is sort of the if you're not quite a full council, and we were looking for partly to understand a land dispute, and actually there was some meeting minutes where there was a discussion, and somebody said actually that was my mum who was on that meeting, and even though the minutes were very nicely recorded, said that apparently there'd been quite a heated debate. So yeah, I think as always, taking the meeting minutes with a pinch of salt.
Yes.
Yes. I think we've all seen minutes of meetings that we were at and not necessarily quite recognise the conversations we recall. But
the person in charge of a meeting is always the one who's making the minutes.
I think when I think of politics and rights, I think it's so important to, as you say, have an idea of the national context, but really importantly, the local context. And because the local context will kind of look at what occupations, what the industries are in that place. And so often, the rights of an individual are linked to things like employment. And thinking of the mills, there was a huge amount where politics and rights were involved in everything to do with the mills. And the Factory Acts was 1837, and the various acts that followed after that. And I think to understand how that would have impacted on your ancestors is so interesting. And then, the reason why the trade unions came about. Were your ancestors involved? Were they in a trade union? And I find that side of things very interesting.
That's absolutely true. I have my grandfather was deeply affected by industrial disputes in the mining community in South Wales. He's an out of work striking miner in the 1921 census. Just after the general strike, he is involved in inter-union battles, the Mining Federation, where they're trying to bring effectively non-unionized labour into his pit. And he was a big man, and there was a lot of fracas and lots of violence. And given that I grew up in the in the 80s was the mining strike with mine with the violent idea, the idea of seeing that the same kind of story in 1926, and I don't think he worked in a mine again after that, having been the it's interesting reading the newspapers at the time how how anti the Mining Federation they were, and they really wanted to clamp down on any miners that were trying to restrict diversification in unions, and he was effectively blacklegged.
Absolutely, Elsa. And I know I mentioned just before we started recording that if anyone's interested in that, can't recommend highly enough a book called Black Diamonds. And it's about the family at Wentworth Woodhouse, and all to do with land and the miners' feelings and the miners' rights, and then the politics that came into that and the land that came into it. It's called The Rise and Fall of a Dynasty, pretty much, I think. But if anyone who's listening is interested in mining history, that is a very interesting read.
I must look it up. I've got plenty of Derbyshire coal miner ancestors.
Yeah.
Yes, must look into that one. And I think for me, I'm always interested in educational rights. I mean, I started my working life as a teacher, and I find the ages that children could or had to go to school, whether they had to pay for it, what schools were available. I find that fascinating, and who was running them, and the political influences on what was taught as well. So yeah, I think that's something I'm going to be looking into in the next few weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned, sorry, Jude.
No, just one sentence. It always seems to be a battle between the Labour and the capital people, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Good. We're getting quite political here. This is good. I was just going to say, in the workbook, it mentions dissenters and people of other groups as well. And of course, going on your point around education, Ruth, education was often organised through communities. So actually, when we're looking at local community, faith communities as well. So, for example, in the Catholic community, lots of money that came together to actually set up schools. And with the re-establishment of the Catholic hierarchy in Britain in the early 19th century, the directive was actually that they should build schools before they should build churches. Because such was the importance. So actually, there's this the sort of the if your place or your ancestors have links with sort of dissenting nonconformist communities of various stripes, then education can be a really interesting point to unpick not just their educational experience, but their sort of wider conditions as well.
Excellent. Well, I think that gives us plenty to be getting on with, and I'm looking forward to hearing today's talks and hopefully digging further into all these different areas. So thank you very much. I'll see you again.